You're listening to 15 Minutes, where we feature community leaders sharing what the rest of us should know but likely don't. Hi, Chad Franzen here, one of the hosts of Share Your Voice, where we talk with top-notch law firms and lawyers about what it takes to grow a successful law practice. This episode is brought to you by Gladiator Law Marketing, delivering tailor-made services to help you accomplish your objectives and maximize your growth potential. To have a successful marketing campaign and make sure you're getting the best ROI, your firm needs to have a better website and better content. Gladiator Law Marketing uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, and decades of experience to outperform the competition. To learn more, go to gladiatorlawmarketing.com, where you can schedule a free marketing consultation. Barry Lewin is a patent attorney with Gottlieb, Rackman, and Reisman in New York City, where he helps people obtain and retain patent protection for industries including software and mechanical technologies, as well as for fashion. While Barry is licensed in the U.S., his client base is worldwide. Barry worked as an engineer in telecommunications for more than 20 years before changing careers and becoming a lawyer. Hey, Barry, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
Good. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, great to have you. Hey, tell me a little bit more then about Gottlieb, Rackman, and Reisman and what you guys do.
So we're an IP boutique, meaning we only do intellectual property, meaning we only do patents, trademarks, and copyrights, but we do everything there is to do about those things. So we help people get patent protection, trademark protection, and so on, and help enforce their rights when their rights may be violated.
How long have you been with them?
I've been with them about 16 years.
Okay.
Right. I started with them actually while I was still in law school.
What is it about this type of law, patent protection, things like that you find particularly enjoyable?
Well, I have a background as an engineer. I have degrees in mechanical engineering, and there's a lot of engineering. There's actually more engineering work involved now as a patent attorney than there was when I was a real engineer. So I just find it fascinating to stay on top of the technology, be aware of what's going on in the world, and knowing it sort of at a not quite a superficial level, but not at a level where you really get into the weeds, to really trying to understand the technologies as they're evolving and how people are using technology to go from one invention to the next, to the next, to the next.
I'd love to hear about your transition from engineering into law, but tell me a little bit more about how engineering, your background as an engineer really puts you in position to work well with patents.
Yeah. So in order to obtain patent protection, you really need to have a detailed description of the invention. It has to be part of the application. And so somebody who doesn't have an engineering or science background might find it particularly challenging, to be able to put that detail in the application. What's more, engineers, scientists, and such, when they invent something, they tend to invent something thinking that what they've invented is exactly the way it will behave in real life. But the reality is that there are many times when inventions evolve for a lot of reasons. One, when you start to implement it, it may not be implementable the way the engineer really wanted it. But more particularly, the market doesn't accept it necessarily exactly the way it was. So one of the jobs I have as a patent attorney is to sort of embellish inventions, thinking about how they might evolve, making sure that's included in the application and utilizing that as time goes forward to try to get protection.
You talked about a lot of people without an engineering background might find it difficult. My dad is an electrical engineer, and I think he would find it incredibly difficult to become an attorney. How did that transition go for you?
The transition went really well. I had been in telecommunications in what was known as the Bell system for a long time, and that industry was evolving, and I had decided I wanted to do something differently. And so I got the idea in my head to go to law school, not thinking that I would end up being a patent attorney. That sort of happened as I was going. But I really enjoyed being in law school. And then I got some great advice from the career services people when I was in law school that suggested that I try to get an internship with a federal judge. I did that, and I worked for federal Judge Jose Linares at in the District of New Jersey. for a long time, for about a year and a half, looking at all sorts of cases. And it was working with and for Judge Linares that I really got the idea of being a patent attorney.
What did you do then? What did you kind of do for him?
So I acted. It was an unpaid internship, but I acted as a clerk while I was still in law school, and he would give me cases to start to help craft opinions. And I would get a case in whatever, First Amendment right, a case in property, a case in this, a case in that, but eventually ended up with a patent case. And this was a litigation. This wasn't helping somebody get a patent, but in the litigation, I spent a lot of time observing how the briefs were written, how the lawyers were conducting themselves, and I thought that that was a pretty fascinating area of the law. And so it was a result of working on those cases. And actually, he had given me one, and I really enjoyed it. And I asked him for a second one, and a third one, and a fourth one. And we wiped out the docket and then moved on to trademarks. And so it was that area that really I found really fascinating, and that's when I decided I was going to do what I was going to do.
So, as you were kind of in the midst of your career as an engineer, was there like a specific event or realization that made you realize you wanted to become an attorney?
Uh, no, I had decided I was going to change careers. I wanted to do something differently, and I had a lot of experience at business development, actually doing real engineering, a lot of pieces of the business, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something differently. And so I started looking at reading all sorts of literature about people who were trying to change careers. And in there was sort of a passing comment about being an attorney and the kinds of things that attorneys do that resonated with me. So as a result of that, I figured I was in my late 40s. I figured, what do I got to lose? I just try to go to law school and see how that works. Worst case is I pay for one semester and I drop out. But I got there and I just loved it. I was going to school nights, still working days, and in a class of people with all sorts of diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences. Something that I hadn't personally experienced because I was really in a very limited engineering world. I had been educated that way. I was always surrounded by the same people. This was the first time I wasn't, and I thought that was fascinating. And the idea of thinking about things differently really resonated with me.
As a student in in your late 40s, were you one of the older people in the cohort, or was it a big age span?
I was one of the older, but there was a big age span, and I was far from the oldest.
Oh wow,
Uh,
that's good.
and so we ended up starting a group. I was at Rutgers Law School in Newark. We ended up a bunch of us who looked older than everyone else got together and started a group that we refer to as owls, older, wiser law students. And Rutgers had a lot of experience in history of bringing in people who were different. They're the most diverse law school in the country, and their definition of diversity means a lot of things. It means color, it means age, it means ethnicity. We were roughly 50-50 men and women. And so there were people like me, people coming from lots of other not just engineering careers. There were nurses, there were older nurses and older doctors and older police, and a lot of people with finance, a lot of people looking to change careers for their own personal reasons. But we all resonated together, and so we were able to actually study together. I still have a lot of contact with those people that I went to law school with. They're referral sources for me, and I'm a referral source for them. Yeah.
Were you? I went back to school, decades after I had graduated with my undergraduate degree, and I was just scared to death of turning things in for grades and things like that. Were you intimidated at all?
I remember thinking that I didn't know how to study for these exams. When I had gone to college and graduate school, we took notes with a pen, and not. And this time I was not. I was taking notes on a computer. It was a real different experience than what I had gone through back in the 70s. But I was not really intimidated. I was more. I found it as a challenge, and it took me and in law school it's really case based, right? You read a lot of cases,
Mhm.
and I had to learn how to read these cases. What I thought I was understanding initially, I wasn't, and so there's there's literally a learning curve you go through to try to understand these things. And I found that to be fascinating.
So while in law school, you got your first job with Gottlieb, Rackman, and Reisman?
Yeah, I was still working when I started law school. I was still working full time in telecommunications, and somewhere early on, I decided that I really enjoyed this. I was going to do this, and I cut the cord. And then I got the internship with Judge Linares. And then after I had the internship with Judge Linares, I guess it was my 3L year, I started working for the law firm part time, just to try to build up experience quickly. I thought as an older student, I couldn't be younger students with very little experience. It's easy to pigeonhole them based on the needs of a particular firm. And I thought that was inappropriate for somebody who was my age. I really needed to figure out what I was going to do and then go after it. And so I did, and I came across this firm in New York. I was living in New Jersey, came across this firm in New York. They hired me as a law clerk while I was still in law school, and then I've been with them ever since. So I was a partner there for a number of years. Now I'm of counsel there. Yeah, but I've been there my whole career.
Has your background as an engineer benefited you in other ways besides being able to kind of know what you're giving patents to or fighting for patents for?
That's a funny question. That's an interesting question. The answer is that part of my practice is outside the United States, and the education process in many of these countries. This is particularly true in Europe and in South America. Is that when they enter college, when they enter university, the students enter university, they basically have to pick a track to go down. And so in those countries, there are people who are engineers and there are people who are lawyers, but there's nobody who has both of those backgrounds together. And so in many of those countries, they find somebody like me fascinating because they don't have to deal with two sets of people who themselves have to figure out how to talk to each other. So that's been really beneficial. So it's ended up helping in that way. Some of the stuff I do, like in Latin America, is related to mining. It's very difficult to find people who understand it both from a legal perspective and an engineering perspective. The other thing is that a lot of my practice, surprisingly, this is not foreign practice mostly, it's mostly US practice. A lot of my practice is in fashion. And so I help people with both design and utility patents in the fashion world. And most of the people that I deal with in the fashion world are really fashionistas, right? They're there because they enjoy fashion. I'm there because I'm looking at how things are put together. So it's a different perspective on it. It helps my clients a lot, I believe. At least I get a lot of positive feedback from them. They have somebody like me working with them.
Is there like a global experience highlight from your career so far that you have that you'd like to share?
A global experience highlight.
Or a particularly memorable, even if it's not a highlight, like a particularly memorable global experience.
Yeah, I've been all over the world doing this, and I've really um, I've really enjoyed probably a lot of the stuff that I've really enjoyed. But I've gone to much of my practice has been in the country of Chile, and in Chile, I end up dealing with a lot of university professors in Chile. There's a very extensive higher education system there, and a lot of people doing research who are looking for help trying to build businesses. So I've worked with a lot of people in Chile. They're wonderful people to work with. They're really sharp, and they're building up businesses. Some of which, you see in the United States, the fruit industry, the wine industry. A lot of that stuff has kind of evolved here. The fishing industry. So it's been great to be part of that. Yeah.
Is there a moment either here, in the U.S. or abroad that you look back on that you're particularly proud of, like a big success or career highlight?
Oh yeah, there's several of them, but there was a case that came through the Supreme Court. It's probably been about 10 years now. It's referred to as Alice, which was a case around limiting how one can obtain patent protection for software. And I recall one case that I had trying to get somebody patent protection, and I may have been the first, but I was certainly one of the first people to actually get past the Alice requirements and get somebody patent protection in view of Alice. And so I felt really good about that, being able to do that.
Great. Do you have any daily rituals that you find most important for you to help you get through a typical day?
Yeah, I try to get out every day. I try to leave the office at some point during the day, and so I'm not. I wouldn't say that I'm particularly skilled, but I'm particularly athletic. So I go out and every day I try to get out for a bike ride or a run or play a sport. And I think that really helps. I think it really helps. What happens is when you're doing this kind of patent work, you're really very focused on trying to make sure you understand all of the nuances that are going on there, and trying to get away from it for a little while, I think really helps a lot.
Yeah, good. Hey, what is maybe the best piece of advice that you can remember receiving, maybe from a mentor, either legally or in engineering or in life?
Um, I guess two things come to mind. The first is when somebody's inventing something and they're trying to put it on paper, they they're doing it to the best of their ability, but what they're putting on paper has to be written for other people. And so, in order to really transform that, the one piece of advice I got was make sure you really, really, truly understand the invention, really understand what's going on, so that you can deal with it and you can explain it to whoever needs to hear it, an examiner or something like that. The other piece of advice that I remember getting early on that was really helpful is that if you decide in the patent world, if you decide that you want to be a litigator, make sure you spend time helping people get patent protection, because that becomes really helpful as a litigator. Conversely, if you want to be somebody who's doing what I do and helping people get patent protection, litigate patents for a while, because then you can see how they get implemented and how people are trying to manipulate them later. And so I did that early on in my career. I thought that was particularly helpful advice, um, and it's helpful. Like I remember just recently, I had a conversation with an examiner about one of the applications, and I had to explain to the examiner why I wanted to make changes, because I was concerned about what somebody might say later, 2 or 3 years down the road. The examiner wasn't really thinking that way, so it's helpful to have those kinds of thoughts and conversations.
I have one more question for you, but first, how can people find out more about Gottlieb, Rackman, and Reisman?
So you can find us on the web. We're at grr.com. And we're an intellectual property boutique. We're located in Manhattan, in Midtown Manhattan, and uh, and that's the easiest way to find us. So you can call the office, but you can find us there, and there's links to all of the attorneys there. You can find me and all the other attorneys there.
Hey, I mentioned that my dad he's a very smart and skilled engineer, but he would never be able to go to law school. My nephew is he's in a big engineering school here in Colorado School of Mines, but he's got kind of an athletic background. He says he doesn't fit in at all at school. Would you say you could relate better to the engineering students you worked with and the engineering colleagues you had, or the law students you were in a cohort with?
Oh, both. Yeah, and that's part of the job of being a lawyer, right? You have to be able to communicate with everybody, whether you have the same background or not. Yeah. So no, I couldn't say. I was fine with both sets.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Hey, Barry, it's been really great to talk to you. I really appreciate your time and your thoughts, and it's been fun hearing your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So long, everybody. Thanks for listening to 15 Minutes. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.